This is the technical assistance session for the National Resource Centers program and the Foreign Language and Area Studies Fellowships program. Our audience is institutions who are aspiring to submit applications to the 2018 competition. I am Cheryl Gibbs, the Director of the Advanced Training and Research Division, and I am very pleased to have my colleagues on the left and my right for support and joy, Kathleen Connors de Laguna and Timothy Duvall. And I want to give them a moment to say something about themselves. Technical assistance workshops, we don't always want to jump into just the meat of the matter. We want to kind of give you a feel for us. So, ladies first.
Sure, I'd love to start. Hello, everyone. Kathleen Connors de Laguna, as Cheryl mentioned, and I share Cheryl's love for this program. I'm speaking without a mic. Hello again, I'm Kathleen Connors de Laguna, and I share Cheryl Gibbs' love for this program, not only as a part of her team, but as a parent. I have a daughter studying abroad this semester, and both my children, this is something they aspire to, so I really appreciate all the work of the educators that prepare these programs for them, and looking forward to work with all of you.
Hello everyone, I'm Tim Duvall. Very excited to be here to give you a little bit of technical assistance this morning, and I think we're going to do some more this afternoon. Kathleen talked about her children. My daughter is currently in the air on her way to Russia with my wife. So I'm a little bit sad today because I miss my ladies, but I'll put that aside and we'll get into some technical assistance. Here we go.
Before we begin, we're going to take questions at the end of part 2 of our technical assistance. But prepare your questions, but know that we will entertain those questions in the afternoon. Continue. Next slide. Next slide. Throughout the 2 sessions, we are going to cover the following: the purpose of the NRC and FLAS programs, the 2018 performance period, what that means for the next 4 years in terms of your application, some slight information or vague information about priorities and funding, not intentionally, but that's just the way it is. We will talk about who the eligible applicants are under these programs, the types of centers, the options that you have in submitting your application. We will cover diverse perspectives and areas of need, the selection criteria for both programs, budget, activities, fellowship component of the application, etc. And we will tag team this presentation among myself, Tim, and Kathleen. So the purpose of the National Resource Centers program is to establish, strengthen, and operate comprehensive and undergraduate centers that will be centers of excellence for the following activities: teaching less commonly taught languages. Now, you recall from the presentations, whether they be technical assistance or the best practices presentations, they all have the foundation of less commonly taught languages. This is what Title VI is about, less commonly taught languages. So as a National Resource Center, this is one of your missions, that you teach less commonly taught languages. You are to be a center of excellence for instruction in fields needed to provide full understanding of areas, regions, or countries where these LICTLs are used. And we use the word use because it's not only speaking the LICTL, but it's writing, it's understanding, it's listening, all of these skill sets that are associated with less commonly taught languages, a National Resource Center should have the capacity to provide that level of instruction. Continuing, a National Resource Center is a center of excellence that enables research and programs of study that focus on issues of global importance. It also provides teacher training activities, professional development opportunities related to your center's world languages, area studies, or international studies focus. One of the mandates of a National Resource Center is that you have the capacity and the resources to conduct outreach to K-16 at the local, regional, national levels. For K-16, that means elementary through post-secondary levels, and that you also interact with the general public and business communities. You also create and maintain linkages with overseas institutions of higher education and other organizations to enhance the center's programs and instruction. In a joint application under these programs, you are requesting or might be requesting to be designated as a National Resource Center, but in the same application, you also request allocations of fellowships. And the FLAS program does these things. A FLAS program awards allocations of fellowships to an institution of higher education and this allows you to identify meritorious students who are enrolled in programs that offer performance-based instruction in less commonly taught languages in combination with area studies, international studies, or the international aspects of professional studies. For those on the line or in the audience who are submitting an application for the first time under this program, I want to emphasize that your interest in the program for FLAS fellowships should not be just for awarding language instruction. The A in that FLAS means that you are, or the A and the S, it's foreign language and area studies. So as you anticipate writing the application, bear in mind that you have to combine the language piece with the area studies piece to be successful under the FLAS program. In terms of performance-based instruction, my attention was drawn to that. Why aren't they using the word proficiency-based? I think in writing this regulation, performance-based gives you the notion or instructs you that your language teaching instruction should enable a student to be able to acquire the necessary knowledge and skills to apply that language to different tasks and to integrate the skills with the knowledge in order to be prepared for real life situations. Thus the word performance-based language and programs. The types of fellowships that you may request in your application are academic year, and as the name suggests, the fellowship is to cover the student's training through the academic year. You may also request fellowships to cover instruction for the summer, and that's, again, the summer session, however, must provide the student the equivalent of academic year training. So they might enroll in a summer program for 6 to 8 weeks, but that 6 to 8 weeks is highly concentrated in that when they come out of that program after 8 weeks or after 6 weeks, they will have obtained the same level of instruction and experience as if they were in a classroom for the academic year. In terms of the budget structure for a FLAS fellowship, an undergraduate fellowship is $15,000, and that includes a $10,000 institutional payment, and essentially the institutional payment is the tuition and fees part of the fellowship, and then there's a $5,000 subsistence allowance, more often called the stipend. So an undergraduate student may compete for, and receive a fellowship for $15,000. An academic year graduate fellowship is double that, a little more than that, $33,000, and the component pieces of that are an $18,000 to cover tuition and fees, and then $15,000 for the stipend. Whether a student is receiving whether the student is an undergraduate student or a graduate student, the summer fellowship for both is $7,500, and this covers $5,000 for the institutional payment and $2,500 for the stipend. In developing your application for both of these programs, it's for 48 months. These are 4-year projects, and the fiscal years covered by the next grant will be fiscal years 2018 through 2021, meaning that the grant will be over in 2022. In the government, we speak in fiscal years rather than calendar years. The project start date should be, if you are awarded a grant, it will be August 15th of 2018, and the project will end on August 14th of 2022. Now, we will recommend the funding up front for a 4-year project period, but in the interim years, the award is based on the availability of funds and the demonstration of substantial progress throughout that year. For fiscal 2018, as indicated in previous sessions, we do not know the competitive preference priorities or the competition schedule. All of those factors are undetermined as we sit here today on September 20th. Hopefully, as days and months go on, we will be able to confirm more information for you. But in any event, when that information becomes available, it will be made through the Federal Register and on IFLE's website and through IFLE's e-newsletter. Eligible applicants for the National Resource Centers program and the FLAS program, you can apply as a single institution of higher education, or you might want to connect with another institution or institutions and submit the application as a consortium of institutions of higher education. And again, we do not dictate the best structure for you. You have to do that legwork yourself and look at your resources, whether it's more beneficial to apply as a single institution or to identify an institution that has similar strengths in programming, in area studies, in language training as you, and decide that you want to submit an application as a consortium. In terms of the types of centers, you can apply, whether you apply as a single institution or as a consortium. Your National Resource Center might be a comprehensive center, meaning that your scope of work takes into consideration training at the graduate, undergraduate, and professional schools level, and that your resources help to contribute significantly to the national interest in advanced research and scholarship. That's a comprehensive center. An undergraduate center, as its name implies, your primary focus is the undergraduate training of students, and you also contribute significantly to the national interest through education of students who are matriculating into advanced language and area studies programs or professional school programs, and that you incorporate substantial international and less commonly taught language content into the baccalaureate degree program. And as we go through the selection criteria such as the curriculum design or your area studies and your and your language programs. These kinds of aspects will be undergirded through those criteria. Some working definitions. If you are a first-time applicant to the program, area studies, in terms of our regulations, this is what area studies means. It means the study of aspects of a world, region, society, or societies, including the study of their history, their culture, the economy, politics, international relations, languages, and other things, the religions. In other words, as a National Resource Center, your training in area studies, there is breadth and depth training that enables a student to be able to understand all of the aspects of a certain region or countries. And I won't dwell on this. The main thing is to understand your role or your unique aspects, whether you are a comprehensive or undergraduate center, but in terms of your resources, you are a discrete administrative unit on your campus, but I would not look at this too closely. The main thing is to identify whether you are an undergraduate center or a comprehensive center, because your institution has more input as to the administrative unit and the resources on your campus. In terms of language instruction, the regulations define intensive language instruction. It means that the instruction offers at least 5 contact hours per week during the academic year, or the equivalent of a full academic year of training during the summer. That's intensive. Again, in terms of priorities, they're yet to be determined. And I want to talk a little bit about this because you might be wondering, why don't you know the priorities yet? Well, we don't know them because that process of identifying priorities doesn't reside only in the IFLE office with our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary Lenore, or with the program officers. Priorities essentially are policy statements. And policy statements are developed in conjunction, in collaboration with the Secretary's office, the Assistant Secretary's office, the policy division of the department, the budget service office in post-secondary ed. So there are a number of very important principles in developing the competitive preference priorities. So this takes time, and we are hopeful to start that process in early fall, like maybe next week, but it takes a long time to develop them, to have them vetted, and then to publish them for your input. So this is why we do not have priorities now to discuss with you, but we're very hopeful that that process we will be engaged in that very soon. That being said, the priorities that are in place now, not past, but NRC competitive priorities that govern the 2014 through 2017 competition. The absolute priority is the teacher professional development, and the competitive preference priorities for the NRC focused on applications that propose significant and sustained collaborations with minority serving institutions and community colleges. And then we have a competitive preference priority that asks you to do the same, but with schools of education. Those are the existing current priorities, but again, we do not have direction or policy statements for the next cycle. For FLAS, again, the priorities have not yet been determined, but the ones that are in place now are in identifying your students for fellowships. We asked you to take into consideration students, undergraduate and graduate, or both, who had a demonstrated need for financial assistance. And we also asked you to consider in awarding your fellowships that you would award 25% of your academic year fellowships to students who are engaged in the 78 priority languages. Another part of the NRC and FLAS application, this information is not scored by the reviewers, but it is legislatively mandated that you put information, these particular narratives in your application, the one that talks about or speaks to how your programming covers diverse perspectives. And so you are providing an explanation of how the activities funded by the grant will reflect diverse perspectives and a wide range of views and generate debate on world regions and international affairs. And the key word there the key words are the activities funded by the grant. So you do not have to cover the whole landscape of what your institution does in terms of diverse perspectives, but the part of your activities that are carved out in the grant application need to address the diverse perspectives. The other part that you are required to address, the areas of need, you are to provide a description of how the applicant, how you will encourage government service in areas of national need as identified by the Secretary, as well as in areas of need in education, business, and nonprofit sectors. Now that reference to identified by the Secretary, every year you may realize that IFLE will send a letter out to several federal agencies, our peer agencies. We will send a letter to the Peace Corps asking them, in their opinion, what areas of need require certain languages and what skills, what areas of service require training in international education. And so that solicitation is or that consultation is what informs this list, the list identified by the Secretary. And that is posted on our website now for the current cycle, and then for the 28 competition, that list will be updated. In terms of the application parts, the application obviously will include the federal forms, and we will go through this in more detail later. You will submit the budget form, the federal budget form. All federal applications have to include the assurances and certifications that the program requires. The abstract, again, the diverse perspectives and area of need. Obviously, provide a table of contents to guide the readers through the application. And then the application narrative, which is the real meat of the application. That's where you tell your story in response to the selection criteria. And then these various appendices, the curriculum vitae, the course list, performance measure form, and letters of support. In your project abstract, remember that this is the reader's first introduction to your program. And so we are suggesting 2 single-space pages. And the project abstract should first let the readers know that what you are proposing is in alignment with the Title VI purpose. You should summarize the specific activities in the proposed project and the anticipated outcomes of the proposed project. Describe your centers or your program or your institute, and I'm using those terms because a National Resource Center, the title or your unit on your campus varies. Some of you are centers, some of you are institutes, some of you are programs. So, but in any case, describe the unique characteristics in terms of your mission and the resources that you have, your library information, and other information systems, outreach, and your outreach to internal and external constituencies. So again, the project abstract is your first snapshot that you're giving the readers that here's who we are, and this is what we're about. and we hope that the following pages will bear this abstract out. And a couple of tips about the abstract. I think it's good to reference that you have participated in these programs, but I would not, that can be a double-edged sword, because you don't want to say we have been a National Resource Center since 1973. Well, a reader might interpret that to say, well, maybe you don't need to be a National Resource Center in 2018, because these applications are randomly assigned, and they might read an application from someone who has not had a National Resource Center, but has demonstrated the same breadth and depth and the resources available. So you don't want to give somebody a message in the back of their head that if you're comparing these two, the breadth and depth is here, the resources are here, the same thing is here, but this institution says they've had a National Resource Center since 1980, since 1969, since the inception of the program. I wouldn't frame it that way. You can say that we have experience in being a National Resource Center, but be very mindful of being tying yourself to time-bound years of having these programs, because that can work against you. Again, the application narrative. This is where you respond to the selection criteria, including any announced priorities for the competition. The suggested page length is similar to what it was last cycle, 50 pages if you're applying as a single institution, or if you're applying as a consortium, the suggested page length, 60 pages. And again, we keep emphasizing that the application narrative is where you address the selection criteria. And these are the criteria, and I want to call your attention to that this is going to be the order of the selection criteria in the 2018 applications. Those of you who have applied in several cycles, previous cycles, this was not the order. The order here is the order as they are presented in the FLAS and NRC regulations. Also, this will allow you to kind of retool your applications. You might remember that in the past, that first criterion was commitment to the subject area. But again, be very aware that the order here is different from the past several cycles. And for 2018, the order will start with program, planning, and budget. For the NRC program, this criterion is worth 25 evaluation points. The program planning and budget criterion does not apply to an application that is requesting FLAS fellowships. And by that I mean if you are a FLAS only applicant, you will not have this narrative, program planning and budget. You will then talk about the quality of staff resources, and then you can see the point values here. The next criterion that you will address, impact and evaluation. Commitment to the subject area will follow that. The next criterion, strength of library. Then you will describe the quality of your non-language instructional and program. In other words, your area studies and international studies program. You will follow that by discussing your language instructional program. Criterion number 8, the quality of curriculum design. 9, outreach activities. 10, your FLAS awardee selection procedures. And then you will discuss any competitive preference priorities for the competition. So the total points for an NRC application is 175, and the total for FLAS, 145. And you will note on the screen that these, you submit an application for combined NRC FLAS, but when it comes to awarding the grants, we recommend institutions on 2 separate slates. So depending on the outcome of the competition from the peer review, we will have a slate that identifies the national resource centers that we are recommending to the Secretary for approval, and we will have a separate slate of institutions that are being recommended to receive FLAS fellowships. But again, you submit the application to request one or the other or both, but our slates are submitted to represent institutions that are successful for each of those programs. So beginning with the first criterion, program planning and budget, it's 25 points. And essentially this is the road map for the readers. In other words, this is what we have laid out for the next 4 years for our program. First, you will discuss the activities and that they are of high quality and directly related to the purpose of the National Resource Center program, which goes back to the initial slides that you offer instruction in area studies and language studies, that you are a center of excellence for research, etc. So this program and planning narrative should tie to those purposes of the National Resource Center's program. You will also discuss the development plan or timeline that demonstrates how the proposed activities will contribute to a strengthened program and an effective use of resources to achieve the proposed objectives. So your timeline will say, over the next 4 years, we plan to enhance our Asian Studies program by adding a certain course. So you would discuss how that is, you will flesh that out in the program planning and budget section. You will speak to the fact that our programming, the costs related to this programming are reasonable in relation to the objectives. And you will also provide a description of the long-term impact of the project on the institution's undergraduate, graduate, and professional training programs. The note at the bottom, the undergraduate NRC applicant will focus in their program and planning at the undergraduate level. I think I have one more, and I will turn it over to Tim. The next criterion, quality of staff resources. You will speak about the teaching faculty and other staff, that they are qualified for the current and proposed activities and training programs, and that your teaching faculty are provided professional development, and that they participate in teaching, supervising, and advising students. Again, as a center of excellence, you're not insular, so you should be providing through your faculty and all of your resources that you are really reaching out to your students, that you have the capacity to advise them, you have the capacity to offer training. And then you should speak to the staffing and the oversight arrangements, including your outreach and administration, and the faculty from a variety of departments, professional schools, and library are involved in the project. Again, a National Resource Center has impact across the institution, so this quality of staff resources should demonstrate that. And finally, and very importantly, that you have non-discriminatory practices for employment. And that speaks to the GEPA, the Government Employment Performance Act, which means that your programs and your employment opportunities are non-discriminatory, that they are accessible to individuals that have disabilities, different racial groups, ethnic groups, etc. So it's important to speak to that in your staff resources criterion. And Tim's going to take it from here, talking about impact and evaluation.
The impact and evaluation criterion has a number of elements associated with it. You're shooting for 30 points on the NRC application and 25 points on the FLAS application. One of the things that you need to do is you need to use enrollments, alumni placement data, participation data for events that you hold, and the way that your center's resources are used to demonstrate that your center has a significant impact on the university, on the community, on the region, and on the nation. Your programming also needs to provide non-discriminatory equal access, so you need to speak to that. You need to include an evaluation plan, one that is objective and quantifiable, in addition to being comprehensive. When you're developing your evaluation plan, you should be sure to use any recent evaluations to help inform it, to show how you're learning from what you've done in the past and how you're moving forward with your programming. You also need to describe how the activities that you're undertaking will address national needs and also generate information for the public. You'll need to demonstrate a record for postgraduate employment, education, or training, particularly in areas of national need. And you'll need to show that you have efforts in place to increase those placements. You also need to show data demonstrating the extent to which students matriculate into advanced language and area international studies programs or related professional programs. Remember that a big part of what the NRCs and the FLAS program are doing is trying to usher students into advanced language levels. That's one of the primary goals of the program. So you need to make sure that you can show the extent to which students are being ushered into that those advanced language levels. You'll need to describe how the fellowships that you plan to award will address national needs. And you'll also need to provide undergraduate and graduate enrollment and placement data. We want to make sure that you have students with a demonstrated interest. You're able to fill these classes, and that's part of what we consider when we're looking at impact and evaluation. The next selection criterion is 10 points on the NRC side and on the FLAS side. This is commitment to the subject area. This is where you show your institution's financial and other support for these various elements: the operation of the center, teaching staff, library resources, linkages to overseas institutions, very importantly, outreach, and students in fields related to the center. Note that it says institutional's financial and other support. It's not just financial support. The readers will be looking for institutions that have a solid foundation in place for teaching languages, in particular less commonly taught languages and area studies. So your institution needs to be able to demonstrate not only financial support, but other forms of support for what the centers are doing. The next criterion is for the library. This is 10 points on both sides, NRC and FLAS. Note that in this day and age, libraries are not just filled with books. There are non-print libraries. In fact, they're getting more and more extensive. So of course, you'll need to make sure that you point out the non-print side of your holdings. English and foreign language holdings, that you are catering to undergraduate, graduate, professional school clientele, that the institution supports. This is another way that the institution shows support for your programming. If it's demonstrating financial support for acquisitions and for library staff, that's going to be something that the reviewers are going to look at positively. And then finally, providing reciprocal access to information. In other words, making sure that your library holdings are available to people with interest, not necessarily just people at your institution, but providing for alternative ways of lending and openness to what it is that you have in your library. The next criterion is the quality of non-language instructional program. This is basically your area studies courses. 20 points on both sides, NRC and FLAS. You need to show that you have a variety of course offerings in multiple disciplines, including the professional schools. This is particularly important for comprehensive centers. It's not required for undergraduate NRC applicants, unless that undergraduate NRC applicant is also requesting an allocation of FLAS fellowships. Then you will need to show that there are a variety of course offerings in multiple disciplines. You also need to show that the specialized courses that you offer in one or more disciplines of the subject area have depth to them. There need to be enough specialized courses offered at the appropriate level to ensure that you can provide the area studies courses necessary to run a successful NRC. You need to have teaching faculty, of course, and instructional assistants, including pedagogy training for instructional assistants. This will help improve your score. And then finally, under quality of non-language instructional program, we have interdisciplinary courses for undergraduate and graduate students. So there should be some list of interdisciplinary courses that you have in place for undergraduate and graduate students in your application. Again, this doesn't apply to the undergraduate NRC applicant unless that undergraduate NRC applicant is also requesting an allocation of FLAS fellowships. And then finally, there's next there's quality of language instruction. There are more elements, believe it or not. 20 points for NRC and for FLAS. Here you'll need to show that the languages and levels offered through the center you'll have to show that there are languages and levels offered through the center for other providers or other providers. You'll need to demonstrate student enrollment. How many students have you had enrolled in these classes in recent years? What are your goals for student enrollment? You need to show courses and disciplines other than just language, linguistics, and literature. And those disciplines, those courses should be offered in appropriate foreign languages. You should provide the number of language faculty and the exposure to pedagogy training to make sure that the language faculty is engaged in performance-based language instruction. And there we are. Performance-based instruction is in use or being developed. It's very important that the students that you're training are able to use the language in day-to-day life. And so they should be taught in such a way as to be able to use it. And so the reviewers will be checking on that as well. And then finally, for this criterion, you need to demonstrate that you have resources for language teaching and practice, and also that you're able to determine language proficiency.
Great.
I think next up is Kathleen.
Thank you. And going beyond the courses that Tim was just mentioning as part of the criteria, the next criteria is focused on curriculum design, and that's 10 points for our NRC applicants and 20 points for the FLAS applicants. And here we want to see that the curriculum incorporates undergraduate instruction into baccalaureate degree programs, whether we're talking about majors, minors, or certificates. And I just want to add a little suggestion for those that want to hear more about that. We had some exciting or very interesting concepts that were brought up in other workshop sessions from current grantees that went into a little more depth and explanation about how they developed some of these minors, especially related to language. We also want to look at curriculum that incorporates training for graduate students from a variety of disciplines and professional fields. We want to see that there's academic and career advising as part of this design, research and study abroad opportunities, and summer language programs. And the next criteria is our outreach activities. And you'll see that that's very important, again, at 20 points for the NRC programs, but not applicable to our FLAS applicants. And for these activities, we want to see, are your faculty and professional schools involved in outreach, as well as if you are able to measure these types of activities, the metrics for regional and national impact of your outreach activities. Do they involve elementary and secondary schools? Do they also involve other post-secondary institutions, as well as your community, business, media, general public? And again, we encourage you to view some of the other grantee presentations to get a better example of the types of opportunity, or the types of opportunities that are currently in place with our grantees. And finally, we are, for the FLAS Awards, looking at the awardee selection procedures. 15 points for this, and for all the applicants requesting an allocation of fellowships. We want to really look at that, review that high quality selection plan, and make sure it describes how the fellowships will be advertised to the greatest number of students able to apply. What's the procedure for each student to apply? How are you selecting students? What are your criteria? What's the competition of your selection committee? And we want to see the timeline for that competition, and how the fellowships address the priorities of your FLAS program. So I believe that is everything that we have for this first part of the presentation on the NRC and FLAS programs. And we'll be going into a lot more detail in our next session, and we will be opening up for questions that time, but no reason why you can't start submitting them in your chat box now, and I'm going to pass it over to Cheryl.
Okay, I wanted to say that this is very difficult to try to segregate the criteria that apply if you're saying, all I want out of this competition is to be a national resource centers. All I want out of this competition is to get FLAS fellowships, or I want both of these. So later on later on in our technical assistance, I'll go back to the slide that lists the selection criteria and try to make sense of that for you. But it's safe to say that most institutions will submit an application to be a national resource center and to request an allocation of fellowships. 99% of the time, you will then be answering all of those selection criteria, except if you're FLAS only, you do not have to tell us about your program planning and budget, and you do not, have to talk about your outreach activities. The part that becomes tricky is, when do we talk about our undergraduate level training? When do we talk about how we're addressing graduate students, professional school students, undergraduate students? So this afternoon, I'll try to make that clearer for you. And as a precursor to this afternoon, in the next competition, we are going to make that easier for the readers, in that we're going to design technical review forms that will say, review this application, it's only an undergraduate center with FLAS, or it's a comprehensive center with FLAS. That way you're not getting a technical review form with 3 columns that might have comprehensive, undergraduate, FLAS. That's very confusing. So we're learning lessons as we go through this process too, every 4 years. It's all about making things more transparent, clearer for everybody. So we're hopeful to have the reviewers have a form that says, this is an undergraduate center that's asking for FLAS fellowships. This is a comprehensive center that's asking for FLAS fellowships. This is an institution who only wants FLAS fellowships. But again, I can understand how it can be very tricky about what questions do you answer, when do you answer those questions, and we'll try to make that clearer throughout the day or in our next session. But the notes on the slides were kind of pointers for you. Don't answer that question if you're not this, or do answer that question if you are. But we will try to make that clearer this afternoon. Tim, do you have anything else to add right now?
Other than thank you?
Oh.
No.
Okay.
Looking forward to the next session.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.